I hope all of you are well. This is David Duvall, and I'm with Jack Cole, and we are going to discuss many things as we have started this YouTube channel, and it's great fun to be able to communicate with others as well, and I hope that we have a few good ideas for you. Jack has come over as he usually does, and we have a good time talking about things that are dear to us. We were just saying before we decided to talk to all of you the idea, because both of us are pianists, and it's in a way one would say our original
Yes.
our original deal in our own psyches to be that, and we've achieved it in some ways, and we've also not been specialists. We're more generalists. We love different things, but we were talking about the idea of you don't have too much fear about many things after you do a piano recital.
Agreed.
And I remember my friend said to me, who was a wonderful pianist, and he said, well, people are interested in the fact that they're so nervous about talking in public. How silly that is compared to the devastation of playing a piano recital. And you agreed. We both said the same thing,
Very much so. When I hear people say that their greatest fear is speaking in public, I'm always reminded that when one speaks in public, they have the latitude of adjusting to the whim of what one may want to say, but not when one is representing the immortal literature of the piano.
Oh my God.
There's that terrible sense that latitude has fallen by the wayside, and one has this almost holy obligation, holy H-O-L-Y,
Sure.
to observe this monumental message from the past, and somehow in that moment, especially with the fear, should there be perhaps that rare person in the audience to whom one is playing a piece for the first time, we imagine that maybe everybody in the world has heard the Moonlight Sonata, but there is someone somewhere who's never heard it before.
And I'm afraid it's the majority of people that have never heard it before.
Yes.
Yeah, so I remember Elliot telling me, he said, nothing is more frightening, nothing is more fearful in the world than playing a piano recital from memory.
You say Elliot? I don't know.
No, he's a former... No, he was a friend of mine who passed away, but a wonderful talent, and we knew each other at Juilliard,
Okay.
years ago. But always I remember that because he was a very frightened person, basically, about everything, but he understood that nothing could compare with the piano recital and the responsibility. And you use the word holy. Yes, Beethoven is the Holy Father, and Bach is the Holy Father. And you are giving this music to them from your innards. It can't be so superficial, because audiences always know something is wrong. Maybe we're not talking about notes or whatever. So I think that was a thing that I have always understood with all of the pianists I've taught over the years. And I would say, don't be nervous, children, because nobody's really listening to you anyway. Your mind the audience's mind is chattering all over the place. They're not following the fugue subject. They're just looking, and maybe if they're mean-spirited, waiting for you to have a memory slip, as even Polini did. I once said, can you believe you had a memory slip? No, I did not. So he was going to fight it even, It's so fascinating what a 2 hours and the preparation, think of the preparation before playing the Ives Sonata or the Liszt Norma transcription. Wonderful.
Now, a question that, because you've known so many pianists, David, at the
I
same
have known a lot, yes.
Though, at the risk of sounding boastful, I feel the piano has helped me to feel that everything else doesn't have a great degree of fear for me. I don't dread speaking in public, and whatever this means philosophically about me, I don't dread much at all, because I feel the piano has exposed me to what I feel is the most tense sense of obligation in a public forum. But that being said, I find oftentimes that pianists seem oftentimes to have a great deal of neuroses that I would think would have been conquered by having conquered this much greater fearsome test. Why do you think it doesn't seem to cure that fear?
Well, I'll give you a good example of a good statement. John Browning, a major American pianist who studied with Rosina Levine and was like Van Cliburn's contemporary, even rival in a way. And he was an immaculate pianist. I mean, craftsmanship was first and foremost. The idea of missing a note was a sin for John. But I said, how are you always, still nervous? Weeks before I have to play in Carnegie Hall, I will be so nervous. I will try it out as many times as possible, which is of course very important to do, and most people don't want to do that because they want to save that energy from the for the concert hall, the platform itself. But no, the more you play, the better, because it is also mechanical, and you never know what will happen. Not to mention, once a whole building, literally, from a huge snowfall in Cincinnati, fell on a recital that I was giving with Stanley Waldorf, right on top of the piano.
While you were playing?
But snow, beyond belief, just snow. I mean, the greatest book can be written by pianists and their careers.
Yes.
Because every recital is different. Every day your hands feel different. One day the fifth finger won't move for some reason, or your stomach hurts. But so John Browning said to me, here's the important point. He said, David, 2 weeks away from the concert platform, and it's as if I've never been there before. So of course it's wonderful that you have in your way learned so many things that so many pianists have not been capable of. They remain very, very nervous, so many of them. Not all, by no means. And I would say that it's a matter of supreme consciousness, of your own awareness throughout your body and your mind. An Arau could never go to a recital without the music of the Liszt Sonata. He would study it just before he had to play it. Since 70 years he's playing the same piece, and his manager once said, "Oh my God, we were all the way in New York, and he had to go back home to get the music." He didn't need the music, of course, but the point is that was a form of fear. And I asked him about fear, and Arau said, "No, everyone is frightened to play. Of course, I don't deny that, but I have learned over a period of time how to use fear."
Yes. And that brings me to my question, and I don't mean to presume to say that when I play, in the rare times that I do, that I don't have a great deal of dread, but it has reinforced a natural impulse that I have. Well, is it Irving Berlin who has the phrase, there may be trouble ahead, but while there's moonlight and music and love and romance, let's face the music and dance. Now, by facing the music, I have then felt that when I encounter, because I said that everything else seems to have less of a degree of fear, when I feel the social and the professional obligations that civilizations oblige me to face, I feel it's not as difficult to do. But you and I have discussed of late, why is it that it seems to be a trend that so many people prefer simply to vanish rather than to face the music? Is it because they don't have something that a resistant material like facing piano recitals where they know what an obligation of terror is, so that when the lesser obligation of even just attending to another human heart is presented, that one knows that they have to give that recital, so to speak? And yet you and I note all the time that sometimes with the most due courtesy that we give to correspondence, whether it's in social cases or professional, I'd say for me, almost 90 to 95% of the time, an ending is indicated by silence. Why is civilization taking the tacit solution?
I wish I could sum it up because it's such a big topic. It's many books alone. The passivity of from television on, radio you could walk around at least, and you could still hear Glenn Miller and his band or something. But no, we have hour after hour of, and we're not putting down technology here. We're putting down the idea that the human being doesn't have enough discipline to stay off of the phone, to get off. You know, they're so happy to have the phone because they don't know what to do with their time if they're not watching the television. And what does television give you? I mean, just dross of every kind, just fluff, terrible stuff, not to mention the most insidious thing that has ever happened to the inside of the human consciousness, the millions of commercials you have to hear, and those millions of dollars that are spent, billions, to make those commercials so enticing.
So you feel this is what makes people in personal and business interactions take the option of avoiding closing out a connection?
No.
How do you account for that?
I can't totally. It's as you know, we've talked about it many times, drives me out of my mind. If I write to someone, I was born to wait for a message and as soon as possible. Now, there is no message. Here we have the instantaneousness of the iPhone. You put it in a message, put it in an email, and you expect it back in an hour or two, and it's never happens.
Well, David, you've heard of this appalling term that people use in dating now when one party just vanishes. They call it ghosting. Have you heard this?
Yes, ghosting.
Now, the reason I find it appalling is that in the past, if perhaps one party is appalling in some way, maybe there is no other recourse but to withdraw completely. That being said,
Of course.
it's become common behavior to simply vanish when one wants to end something. And I find the term ghosting offensive even to the idea of a ghost, because the ghost implies that something is still prepossessing and remains even though they are not present. So I find that an insult to the notion of ghosts. It's something else that we must call this fear. And to come back where we started, the piano is a great, great teacher of facing fear.
Yeah, I've always told everyone that is even an amateur or a beginner, you play for everyone every time you can, and you will start feeling better. Last session we talked about one hand learning a Bach invention, one voice, then the left, then taking 3 years if necessary. Why? Why should we count the time? Or why should we, like so many pianists, I must practice my 4 hours a day. Tchaikovsky, one of the greatest pianists, I call him the last romantic, not Horowitz, he is. And I knew him fairly well, and wherever he went, he had his piano in his hotel room, and he always had his clock. Nothing would stop him from the 4 hours a day. Now, you see, he didn't mind in his case because he was a frivolous and interesting and flamboyant and half-mad character, a little leprechaun. But he would not mind if you called him and interrupted it.
Okay.
You see, because that's fine. But he would go back and start again exactly until that 4 hours were finished. Now, those 4 hours, you see, were his form of discipline to the craft. Well, it's the hand. The hand has to have something to do in life. You don't you see the appalling handwriting? I mean, it's scary. I can't even read the handwriting of people anymore. It used to be so beautiful, so distinctive. So the hands have to do something. Well, is there anything better for the hands and the brain together than playing the piano? Or, you know, it's so wonderful because at least it will give you results instantaneously.
It does.
Here's your harmony, here's your melody, here's your little Indian dance from, book one of your whatever.
Oh, of the John Thompson teaching little fingers to play,
yes.
the Wigwam song.
Yeah, the Wigwam song, and my great virtuoso piece was all open fifths,
Yes.
A to E, with the moccasin dance, know. And these little things taught you something because the melody of that moccasin dance could be as certainly Tchaikovsky never knew it, but just by one half step, he made it into Mark Slav,
Yes.
one of his most famous. So there's a learning process of how to compose even, you see.
Well, it's not too far a leap from the beginning of the Wigwam song to the opening of the Mephisto Waltz with all that quintal
Yes, of course.
harmony building up.
The greatest pre-Bartok work
Yes.
in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so much wonderful. I mean, I want you to all listen to every recording you can. I mean, it's instead of watching whoever's on TV, I don't remember anyone's name anymore because they're not good enough to remember. But and you don't have to remember my name or Jack's, but you know you can turn us off as I hear. But I don't, please. For us, it's important. Willard Beecher, the greatest psychologist that I had ever known, who I would say I studied with him. I learned more about the piano from this man.
And he was the author of Beyond Success and Failure?
A book that I recommend to everyone to change your life in one way or another, based on what Beecher said was the only thing we really have in life that's given to us different than the animal. We don't have our instincts any longer. We don't have anything to work with. We don't have any fangs. But we have the indispensable human initiative.
Mm-hmm.
Go do it yourself. And there may be your answer to, they just don't have the energy any longer to answer you. Or the answer may be more complicated that they want than they can get. This also is a fear of some type. And I always remember that Beecher, who was a great king of aphorisms, would say, I said, what's the major emotion,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Beecher? And he would say, major emotion is, in all of evolution, fear. Fear of not getting the prey,
Yes.
if you're a lion. Fear of not eating, fear of starvation, fear of psychological terror that you can have from anything. But fear to him was the major emotion, and he said, of course, it's not going to be ever necessarily conquered, but if you do conquer fear, you will be invincible.
Well, I think that might be, I was always told, I'm sure you heard the generalization, when one starts the piano, it'll make you better at math or things like that. I never
had that at all.
I
got
never
worse
read-
and worse.
So did I. However, but if we go back to fear, it certainly allows one to see the kind of greatest homeopathic dose of fear one can get, hence other doses seem mild. And perhaps that goes back to where we started. Do you think rather than facing fear as an evolutionary or developmental element, the reason people aren't responding anymore is because they have the ability with machines and phones and rudeness and the absence now of a code of conduct to avoid fear altogether? So hence, that's what the real breakdown maybe of civility is our ability to avoid fear and pay no consequence for it.
So articulate you are. Pay no consequence for it is a very important part of their thinking. And they cannot take the normal, you know how I hate myself when I feel, oh my God, I'm so rejected. No one is calling me back, and I'm trying to get an agent to sell my book.
Mm-hmm.
And no one's calling me back because nobody seems to make a living anymore. I say, I need money, but nobody seems to work. Have you seen that also?
I have, yes.
It's unbelievable. I would go to a radio station to do a show, and I would see 100 employees, and they're all watching porn on their computers or something else. They're not doing any work.
Right.
The society is so overpopulated as well, and really this is not 150 million people like in 1950. This is almost 400 million people here, and they're vying for more and more survival because their standard of living, not only for their children but for themselves, is dying very quickly. So there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of humility There's no humility in everyone is so great. Have you noticed?
Well, again, I think that comes from the ability to avoid fear. That humility certainly is bred by moments in which we are fearful of something, and if we can dodge it. You mentioned Beecher. Over the years of speaking to you, you've referenced him many times.
Yes.
Are there other things that bring him to mind? I have made an effort actually to try to find a copy of Beyond Success and Failure. It's not easy to do.
No. And there's a Beecher Foundation. I don't know if it after his death. He was maybe that's 30 years ago. He was 79 years old, and I remember him saying, he said, "Well, I'm not afraid of death at all, and I'm hoping though, because it's so interesting down here.
Yes.
I hope that there's a little thing I can see the world, and see where it's going."
Yes.
Because that man was fearless. He really was. He had such initiative. One day I went to see him, and all of a sudden, paintings were on his wall. They were all bare before, and I said, "Well, Willard, where did you get all of these paintings?"
Mm-hmm.
He said, "I painted them myself." I saw the walls and I said, "They're bare. They need some paintings." After all, Picasso said, "What's a wall for except for paintings?"
Mm-hmm.
And I did them all. And I said, "I don't think they're too bad." He said, "I don't care if they're bad."
Do you know what became of his work?
No,
Okay.
nothing. The idea was that he's not interested in going out and buying a print of a Van Gogh. Get a paint and,
Mm-hmm. And was his wife also instrumental in writing his books?
I don't know how much, but I know that he had a wonderful relationship with his
Okay.
wife, Marguerite, who
Okay.
no doubt has died also. And she was on the authorship of each of the books as well, Willard and Marguerite Beecher. I don't remember meeting her even, actually,
Okay.
and many times that I saw Beecher. They were students of Alfred Adler, the great psychologist, and they had a great admiration for him. And he turned me on to many books also. And he was a singer and a frustrated performer.
Okay.
And he had to overcome the musician and performers idea that they really can't become great.
All right.
And he learned as a psychologist how to make singers feel better, because they, of all performers, forget pianists or violinists, all performers, they're the most neurotic. They get up every morning and they say, "Oh my God, my vocal cords are not working.
Right.
I have what if I get a cold out there? I can't sit next to that, They're very worried." And he was an expert in calming, I think, the nerves of many singers in the Met and so forth.
Oh, well, that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
He didn't care about that in any sense. What he cared about was Beyond Success and Failure, period. And in subsequent episodes of ours, I'll read things from that book.
Okay.
There was also, which I've never read and I've looked for also, and it's supposed to be excellent, called Parents on the Run.
This is also a Beecher book?
Yes, it's a
All right.
Beecher book about, how parents have absolutely 40 years ago or no control over their children. The child just runs them ragged. And the society begs for that. Right now you're having this Barbie doll thing for the tariffs. Oh my God. The chief of America says, so they won't have 30 dolls, they'll only have 2. It's very easy for a billionaire to say, you won't have 30, you'll only have 2. Most of them will not have any. The point is that we are entering a time where the child, because he says, it doesn't matter if it's only 2. Well, his children must have had 30 or 50 or 100 dolls, right?
But you're saying Beecher was saying that the real problem are children with too much power.
Oh, the power of the dollar started with the LP record when, before that, the little 45, and then into the great rock and roll. Every one of these kids were spending every bit of their allowance, which was bigger than it had ever been in history after World War II, and then into the 50s, and then bang, Elvis comes, and the whole rock world comes, and it just stole every possibility and energy from the record companies to concentrate on Stravinsky or any of the important composers. Columbia, as a lip service, had all of Copland's music on record, and Stravinsky, both of them conducting, things like that. However, basically speaking, that LP was the beginning of the music industry, which is now, facing different problems.
And yet it still must have tapped into some weakness in the masses. I was, in doing the research for that recent essay that I was working on about Jenkins, as in
With
Jenkins,
Frank Sinatra, yeah.
yes. And his son wrote a biography of his father, Bruce Jenkins, the son. And he talks about his father being baffled how young people would go into a record store and not ask for something by name or their taste, but what was the most popular. Now, how could that have been a latent force to be tapped in a civilization that only a century before was a frontier nation that was so built on the notion of individuality, of what its personal choice would be? Why was there that latent weakness that then could be exploited so that it puts us where we are now, where art music is on the ropes, and things that I am not able to, even in the most civilized, polite moments, to credit as being music or being art? And yet people will call it the product of an artist or of a performer.
Well, this drives me crazy, because that word is the most sacred word in the English
Yes.
language. For me, no art, no life. What are you living for? I mean,
Yes.
you don't know anything about science. It's so, you have to have a whole new education, and they're certainly not going to be giving it to you in school. I don't remember one thing my biology teachers ever said to me.
Mm-hmm.
There's no methods or training of teachers at all, let alone the idea that knowing a lot of things is a very good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so without, let's say, I say to everyone, you've got to know the dates when Berlioz was born. You've got to know who was born in 1809.
Yes.
So you ask me, and you say that. Now ask me who was born in 1809.
Well, I'm sure you, above all people, can give me a
Well, I will certainly be able to do every year, because
Yes.
without it, I can't synthesize history.
Yes.
So let's say 1809. Well, have you heard of Tennyson? Wow. Have you heard of Abraham Lincoln?
Yes.
Wow. Don't you think this is the most important thing on
Sure.
the YouTube right now?
I think it is.
Because the idea of synthesizing, as we talked last week,
Yes.
is so important. How do we understand that all through Western culture in 1809, everyone knew everyone's work already? There were no publicity machines.
Mm-hmm.
They knew. Mussorgsky knew of Darwin's work, and so Darwin is also born in 1809. Everyone knew of Lincoln's work, of the Civil War, and the hoping of unity of country instead of disunity.
How do you account?
Felix Mendelssohn,
Mm-hmm.
greatest prodigy after Mozart, born in 1809.
How do you account for the dissemination of great work at a time when the notion of publicity machines was just something in the imagination in the future? Now, of course, we encounter people who all feel that they need a publicist, they need these different things. And of course, what they're publicizing usually is just dross and will be forgotten. What accounts for the ability of a primitive society to have been such a good curator of its important values, whereas now with infinite equipment of dissemination and distribution?
And it means nothing, by the way.
Yes.
We don't understand how little it means.
Right.
There's no reason for a performer to give out, $2,000 a month to a PR agent or something, because there's too little to be able to be gained from that amount of money now.
Mm-hmm.
But they had no great meaning. Toscanini didn't have any press agent, and yet, you know, he invented the big music appreciation thing in America single-handed. I mean, to the point where NBC said, "Here's your orchestra, and let's do something from Carnegie Hall."
Mm-hmm.
And every Sunday you had a Carnegie Hall concert, and my God, it was fantastic, wasn't it? In 1894, the great pianist Josef Hofmann, who was just back to the concert stage, only 6, 7 months, and Anton Rubinstein was his teacher for 6 months, and he loved him so much. And Anton Rubinstein hurt him very much by saying, "There's nothing more I can teach you. You're 18, get back to this concert stage. You had your money from the Corning people to stay away from the stage and, you know, keep your parents alive in Europe and yourself and study with Rubinstein." And all of a sudden he's in a little town in England, and he walks out and he plays for Anton Rubinstein, this perhaps second greatest pianist of the 19th century, comes out after hearing of the death of Rubinstein, and his heart, I mean, they really had hearts. They could sob. He walked out and he was sobbing, and he sat down and he played the funeral march. The first chord, the whole audience, practically the whole town, stood up in homage to, in memoriam to Anton Rubinstein. Hoffman never had a press agent. Anton Rubinstein never had, ridiculous. Yet Steinway brought him to America in 1872, and he played 215 concerts to packed audiences all through America. Stagecoach, train, huge programs. How Ruby played was, there was a big poem, was the big thing of the day.
Oh, we're talking about Rubinstein now, not about Hoffman.
Yes, Rubinstein. But Hoffman did his funeral march. They all knew. There was no headlines or radio in 1894 when Rubinstein passed away. He sat down and they all knew. Was it from one little newspaper article? No. It was from an awareness of the world around you and the understanding, even if you didn't know great music, and many more knew it than you have any idea of, for there was no competition from all the junk stuff. So, you know, everyone played Anton Rubinstein's Melody in F, or Gershwin 25 years, 30 years later. He was stunned in a penny arcade when he heard the Melody in F. It changed his life. He had the sensibility in him to be moved by a human-made melody.
Why has the literature of Rubinstein passed away so much?
Well, that's a very good question, because it was chromaticized and convoluted. He was a Mendelssohnian harmonist. And as Liz said, Rubinstein's music, although everyone loved it at that moment, his symphonies, his Ocean, his fourth piano concerto, all of that was big time stuff, but it all died out, and it had no choice, because the Russian Five now had a flavor of the Oriental Levant and the Islame, and then Tchaikovsky's Europeanized forms, but into Russian and into chromaticism far above Mendelssohn's harmonic palette. So this is why 12 like major operas and 9 symphonies and just a tremendous, I don't know how a man in 64 years could have traveled so much, could have played so much. He was the inventor of the historical recital and played. He had a management, but there was no posters everywhere. Everyone knew Rubinstein was going to be here, and it was packed. Everyone knew wherever Liszt was that they had to hear him.
Well, I guess it's the power
Why? I don't understand it either. I've thought about it many times.
The power of substance over the power of manufactured publicity. What I know of Rubinstein principally, outside of your own books, I guess I know from On Piano Playing of Josef Hofmann.
Yes, yes.
Are there other primary accounts that you would recommend if one wanted to dip into the lore of Rubinstein?
The lore of Rubinstein is documented in many places. There's one biography of Rubinstein brothers. His fellow was Nicholas Rubinstein, the founder of the Moscow Conservatory. And Jack, it's amazing. We watch all these murder cases on.
Yes.
I would like to write a scenario because I've tried to find a little bit out. The fact is, he was a gambler. The Nicholas Rubinstein, who was the teacher of Tchaikovsky.
And is this not also the Nicholas Rubinstein who dismissed the first piano concerto of Tchaikovsky?
Yes,
the first
same
part?
man.
Yes, okay.
Same man, but even that is quite wrong in the
Oh,
outliner
I
notes.
see,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
all he said was in a bad mood that day
All right.
because he would later on play it. And one thing he was correct about, you see, one has to learn to sometimes take criticism. Tchaikovsky was not a good pianist even. He played,
Mm-hmm.
and Nicholas was a great pianist, his brother even greater, Anton.
Yes.
And when Tchaikovsky on that December day, where he, of course, any rejection could put him, into a suicidal mood, Rubinstein, what he was really saying was not the thematic material, but your piano layout is very awkward.
Mm-hmm.
And it remains so to this day, but Tchaikovsky then later revised it into a much more playable, as he himself grew to know the piano better.
Mm-hmm.
But you could never say that Rubinstein, that Tchaikovsky's first concerto, as popular as it is playable for pianists on the same level as, let's say, Rachmaninoff's second.
Mm-hmm. And yet, could we also say that though it is ill-conceived mechanically, it's also somehow well written for the piano? It seems to speak, notwithstanding the suffering that the executant has to go through. Do you understand what I mean? That there are some composers who are great but can't write well from the piano.
Yes, yes.
And yet, and hence the piece suffers for that. I remember
Yes.
playing for you the third piano sonata of Korngold.
Yes.
And I know from hearing recordings of Korngold play how facile he was. And you remarked, after hearing it, that you suspected that Korngold didn't quite perhaps know how to write for the piano. And I'm just
Not always,
Right.
probably, but that area showed something wrong.
I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
And yet, Tchaikovsky, even in conceiving something that may have been awkward in the tactile sense, still conceived of something that speaks through the piano.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just think that's an interesting conundrum.
And that is an interesting thing to speak of any time, because we're talking about Korngold is a terrific film composer and this, and he wrote a very interesting opera, the Todesnacht.
Oh yeah, the Dead City.
Yes, the Dead City. And it was a real prodigy and so forth, but he's not Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky has all humanity's pain and heart and amorousness in him, and that will come out even in his orchestral music, and his second piano concerto is absolutely marvelous. There's so much to delve into Tchaikovsky, his religious works, his operas. I mean, they must be magnificent, but we don't know Russian, and nobody knows Russian. Singers don't really, concentrate on it. They're interested in the few Italian and French and so forth. But Tchaikovsky in that concerto, yes. I mean, there's no possible way that that humanity and passion and madness and hysteria doesn't come out. And if there's anything in the pianist, he has really a real important job to make certain that once more that concerto is played with great effect, because its fame also keeps it into the mediocrity of the many players who want to study that way beyond their ability.
I understand.
Yeah. There's only a few people that can play the Tchaikovsky concerto on a magnificent sense, such as Horowitz with Zell in a pirated recording from Carnegie Hall, and it's so interesting. this idea of interpreting the composer for the public with the responsibility that they better make a good job of it, because this is a famous work. You can do anything with a piece of junk, and you can do anything with any piece if you don't have it in you to be a good interpreter.
Mm-hmm. What do you make then, if we go back to the theme of fear, for pianists that seem to have infinite facility? I remember from your own prefatory material in Evenings from Horowitz, where you did the biography, there are multiple instances. I think there's even that remarkable one where Horowitz wants to cancel one evening, and the manager says, well, if you want to cancel, then you have to go out and tell the audience. And rather than speak, he decides to play, and plays, again, with great facility. But how would you characterize someone who has infinite power as a Horowitz, still retaining fear? Is it the sense of responsibility? What is the nature of the fear there?
It's an important fear, and it's very complicated. For instance, every pianist is worried about what other pianists do with another piece.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something I hope everyone becomes a pianist, just to be able to feel all these incredible things that are so far beyond just you putting paint on a canvas. It's like, wow. I say, Maestro, what are you doing now? I'm working on Mendelssohn's Capriccio, not Rondo Capriccio, Scherzo a Capriccio. Oh, nobody knows it. Nobody knows it. That's important. That's because he wants all pieces that he plays to be his only.
Yes.
So here is already, you give it hours to it, you don't want anyone else. I said, Maestro, but Anton Querti has a good recording of it. Too dry.
Yes.
And so I make the error, so to speak, God, because I could have looked stupid. Fortunately, I was correct in my remembrance. And I say, well, even one of your idols, and his idol was Anton Rubinstein, but he was dead 10 years before. You see, he was still the idol of a huge Russian mass of people that played the piano. I played the Rubinstein Romance in E flat. Every boarding school child did for 40, 50 years. But that's about all that's left. It's a great gamble when you're a composer, of course.
Yes.
Or we don't know anything about Rubinstein, and yet here we are talking about Anton Rubinstein. When Arthur Rubinstein came out one day in a concert, he was always taken for Anton Rubinstein in Europe, and they didn't know necessarily he died, and so he would say, I am not Anton Rubinstein, I am Arthur.
I remember you saying this.
Yeah. So Horowitz would, he said, how do you know that Anton Rubinstein played this piece? This is big stuff for him. You see the major aspect of tradition in him, the tradition of the piano, the tradition of, oh, if I could have only heard Liszt, He was nothing in his own mind. Liszt must have been way up there.
And is this because, if we were to go back to fear, that the pianist has to face something that the only analogy I can think of is the intentionally that we find in the English novel for distinguishing oneself by the most delicate distinctions of etiquette. So that because the text is finite, the latitude is so small for a pianist to have his identity revealed, that I know that probably drove me out, knowing my limitations as a pianist, that I couldn't really survive the high tea table, so to speak, of the greats and the latitude in which they could distinguish themselves. For example, you were telling me about the Liszt Sonata recording of Levy. Am I saying his name properly?
Levy, yes.
Ernst Levy. And I'm going to say, perhaps that's another reason I knew that I had great limitations as a pianist, and I was just a meek Puritan. I heard it. I was shocked.
Oh, you did? You heard it?
Yes.
Shock, isn't it?
I was shocked at the liberties that are in there. And
of course, they all had that.
So I felt like this old schoolmarm listening to it, thinking, gosh, he had boldness that now that I'm in my dotage, I think, if only I had thought with such liberty when I studied that intensely. Because no one, at least by the time I was studying, intimated that the piano could have that much latitude, though the text is finite. But now, I don't think that latitude is practiced, so no wonder everyone becomes so rigidly terrified.
So they're terrified.
Yes, so maybe is the last great teaching element of playing the piano in public the fact that we're facing fear, because that latitude is now so narrow that all we face is this terrible fear of perhaps maybe moving the spoon in the wrong way at the great table, so to speak, in terms of the English novel analogy.
So right, Jack. Going back to that Scherzo Capriccio of Mendelssohn, which is a masterful piece. A great recording by Horowitz and a great one by Tchaikovsky. So important to compare them. I don't mean in a demeaning way, to hear the way they handle, two masters handle the same material, but talking about how uptight and notes and watch the text, all of it. They never thought like that.
Yeah.
If you take the editions of Moscheles or many 19th, Von Bülow, many 19th, you can actually tell how they played the Mozart, Beethoven sonata. They're telling you in their editions, which are extremely, amazingly free. They're going to tell you they phrase it this way, they do this, they that, they finger it this way. It's a whole world. How are you? This is scholarship on its highest level. I want to go from the Urtext edition to the Arau edition to the Schnabel edition. All of them have so many interesting things for you to ponder. Going back to that Mendelssohn piece I was discussing, Horowitz is playing it for me, and he's in such glee. He says, "Look at this. Can you tell that I leave out 4 notes? Because they were too hard to put in the thirds."
Yes.
He leaves them out. Nobody hears. You think they hear it? Of course not. Now, some pedant would say, "You're leaving that note out? Oh, it's ridiculous. Of course you should."
Well, that makes me wonder then, this question. We began today talking about, or at a certain point, the idea of etiquette and the strange penchant people have to avoid etiquette, just withdrawing into silence. Why do you think the piano world, its etiquette became more rigid? Why is the sense of obligation, the sense of high morality so intense that one is afraid to move a hair's breadth left or right?
Well, these concert pianists or violinists or cellists, they don't compose. They have no creative, let's say Rachmaninoff is coming back from a performance of his 3rd concerto. That night, he comes home, he's tired, he sits down, but he's working on his 4th concerto, and he goes and he, you see, it's, the imaginations of people have been stopped. Now, that's one of the reasons I hate machines so much, because I don't want my imagination stopped. I don't want passive. I want total activity. And if you don't have it, what's the point of anything, really? I must finish the story. So I'm telling Horowitz about Rubinstein has also played it on his historical recitals. Mrs. Horowitz's ears prick up. Maybe she'll get David now on this, And she runs to the other room and finds the Rubinstein biography that I was telling you about. And Rubinstein has his own autobiography also, but there's nothing, you couldn't find it in a million years now. But she brings it down, she opens up as if she's going to get me. What have you told Mr. Horowitz? That, Anton has played that piece? There she finds it. There it is, historical recital number 3, Mendel's. The piece becomes more valuable even to Horowitz because a god of Russian pianism played it.
Well, now is that perhaps what's happening to us? We don't defer to our earthly gods, we defer to the machine.
No, we don't care about the earthly gods. Horowitz never played anything the same way. And I was with him when he played. There was no night in 3.5 years that he ever did not play for me. Isn't that amazing?
It is. Mm-hmm.
But one time, and that was my fault.
I remember the story.
Yeah.
Now, may I ask, in composing your book about Horowitz, it's not all from memory. You kept notes?
Yes.
So what was your method as a journal keeper at that time?
No, it was very random. I didn't ever think of doing any book, or the second book, which is 126 essays on Horowitz, called Remembering Horowitz, by all the great pianists.
Mm-hmm.
5 or 6 snobs did not want to write about them or something, but everyone seemed to want to, and I said, you can say anything you want. I mean, he did some crazy things that you may not like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a very isolated man as a great romantic figure in music, meaning the way he handled music, not the romance.
Mm-hmm.
And he did as he wanted. Did you have a PR person? No. Mm. Imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Or he hears a famous violinist doing a ragtime piece on a commercial. Can you imagine me doing Scott Joplin on a commercial? You see, things like,
Yeah.
I mean, he's turned down $1 million for the Gershwin movie. They wanted him in it. Oh, I will not play, or a Chopin movie, the same thing. I will not play Polonaise of Chopin with the orchestra behind me.
Mm.
It's not
Yes.
for orchestra. No, it's a...
And yet, may I ask, I'm also a child of the movies, at least movies at that time. Do you think that, though they bastardized those scores to a degree, that at the same time, for the children of America who went there with their quarter on a Saturday matinee, that there's something lost after the popular culture stopped distributing music that way, even if it was distorted? It seemed to add to the luster of the gods, old Hollywood, in celebrating, say, the lives of a Chopin or a Liszt. However distorted the biography it was.
Or a scientist, or,
Yes.
Pasteur. He was born in 1809 too.
Yes.
You see how the mind goes when you just even say 1809, who was born there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it Pasteur who said, chance favors the prepared mind, and your mind is always prepared?
No, God, no. So many blanks, so many blanks.
Well, I can't detect these lacunae.
No.
So, now, may I ask, though old Hollywood would distort, it seemed to, however, have a reverence for man or mankind, and then the gods
sure.
of mankind. And though ostensibly they continue to churn out biographical films about people of the past, there's this ostensible zealotry for what they think is verisimilitude or truth, but it seems to not serve a greater truth. I, in other words, still will turn to these old Hollywood depictions and feel somehow elevated, even if the music is distorted to a degree, and somehow feel a greater reverence for Chopin than when I hear a moderated, rigid, modern performance. Why is that? I mean, do you feel the same?
No, I feel the same, and those were wonderful movies, those biopics, because it was really your only way of learning some facts, and many of them were exactly true.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to the Gershwin movie and so forth. So all takes place properly.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that his father said, oh yes, it's an important piece. It's 15 minutes in the Rhapsody in Blue,
Yes, the timings.
For the father, a big piece was a long time.
Yes.
And
yet, presumably that's true according to the literature.
yeah,
the father
very
did
much so.
clock the pieces.
Yes, he would clock the pieces because, a song has words and it's only 3 or 4 minutes. But,
Mm-hmm.
my son is now writing 15-minute pieces, and then, American in Paris, 20 minutes,
Yes.
and Porgy and Bess, hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what happened, you see, was Hollywood took over after World War I to become the dominant cultural medium in the world, and people started calling movies art. And they were confusing what art was. Maybe in the Soviet Union you had Eisenstein or others that, they are real artists. And Hollywood got a very bad name, because the moguls were all money-making men.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also a certain anti-Semitic aspects to money making in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
They were, if they were Jews, oh well, they don't know anything, but they certainly know how to exploit to make money. So they indeed would, give you Zola or Wagner or list biographies, and in many cases they were hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people knew they were
Mm-hmm.
not real,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe it turned on Liberace, let's say, even because he saw the Song Without End, or whatever it was called, the Chopin thing, and he said, look at that candelabra, I'm going to use that in my junk.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout his life, he reveres Chopin, and he tells, all of the old ladies that come to see him in Las Vegas, man, that Chopin is something. And he would give them 7-minute polonaises,
Did you ever meet Liberace?
No, but I followed him once.
Okay. Uh-huh.
I followed him when I saw him, and I had known he was at the end of his life.
I see. Okay.
Well, look at the one with the famous actor, the son of.
There's a Michael Douglas
Yes.
biography of him, I think, or
That
film.
that is an amazingly crazy movie.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, you have to.
All right.
I'm actually writing an article on Liberace because without him, you wouldn't have had America's immense buying of these spinet pianos in the 1950s, because piano building was over with, in a sense. So from, Steinway was making airplane propellers during the war. You were not allowed to make pianos, and that was going through the world. And piano firms all over, Pleyel, on and on, they were all ending their long careers. But in America, the middle class, having so much money coming in so quickly, the LP now invented in 1948 or so, not that they did not put on lots of classical music, they did. They just put all their money, though, into the few rock people, and most of all, they made their fortunes on musicals. They made huge amounts of money on those. Goddard Lieberson was the president, and he was a composer, and he was the one who got Goldmark to finally put his signature on the invention of the LP. It was all for classical music because Goldmark had no interest in music but great music. Going back, though, to what you were saying, after the war, there was a long spree of drinking, and there was very little culture. You had your Fitzgerald and Amera and all of that. And
You mean after the First World War?
the First World War
Okay.
ends the life of the 19th century.
Okay.
And after that now comes the tremendous amounts of money poured into the machines, and the Depression was worldwide, and then bang, by 1939 or so, you had tremendous blockbuster movies like Gable's Gone with the Wind, with who was the creator of Gone with the Wind?
Margaret Mitchell.
Yeah, the novel, the one novel she ever wrote. And now you can't see that. It's not allowed, you see, because of the way the treatment of the black slave. However,
But don't you think all that the movie does is suggest that the behavior of the black characters in the movie are endemic to those characters? I mean, now, when I was a child, I didn't come away with the impression that I was seeing a characterization of an entire race when I saw individuals carrying out a certain portrayal. No more than I thought that all beautiful white women behave necessarily just like Vivian Leigh in that movie.
right. It's
So-
so important that you just said that, because that is what has happened to us. The idea of the individual, and within a time scope, I mean, you're not portraying, a politically correct 1990s or 2000 America. You are talking about a period of time, and as an individual, you see, you have nothing in common with the great mass who are revolting into one huge energized product. You're a person that is only Jack Cole, writer, pianist, thinker. So you're going to try to find the few people that you can consider individuals in your life to talk to, because you can't talk to many people any longer, as we all know.
Agreed.
So the machine age had such an impact. I mean, I once said to Aaron Copland, how could you have thought of writing those ballets and writing in 1930s a work of such industrial grief and gloom as the Piano Variations? And I want to say that, he was taken aback because he understands that was really amazing. And he was very happy that people like Leonard Bernstein played it, he played it.
The Piano Variations.
Yes, the Piano Variations. This is a work now 100 years old almost, and it's terrifying still.
That is amazing. It's a century old because it's very, very severe sounding.
Oh my God! This isn't the fanfare for the common man where we can hear in 3 minutes. We hear the sweep of the American prairie. This is a very talented and gifted man, and we don't.
Well, what was his answer? Did he say how?
No, he didn't understand it. He understood it, but he didn't want to answer it because something about that he knew. He knew that took great courage. He was only 30 years old. And he had already mined the jazz world in his piano concerto. He had written his organ symphony. And now he would be writing for music for radio, and then finally, into the things that made him famous. The only thing he ever said was he was disappointed that the short symphony, which is like a transcription of the Piano Variations, never made it at all in performance.
So the short symphony is an orchestration of the Piano Variations.
Yes, that's what I don't remember for sure.
Okay.
I know I heard it only 1 or 2 times, and I thought it was great.
Okay, I have to hear that. I have not heard the orchestration.
Yeah, so Copland is like in his 3rd symphony. If you wanted to say, what is your great American symphony? Yeah, the 3rd Symphony of Copland, certainly the 3rd Symphony of Roy Harris, the 3rd Symphony of William Schumann. There's many. The 3rd Symphony of even Piston, such an elegant symphonist. We have sessions, all born, by the way, in 10 years of each other.
Why do you think it's the 3rd Symphony? Because also Ives, it was the Pulitzer Prize, I believe, that they gave to the 3rd Symphony
One of the
yet
greatest
again.
works.
And presumably in the lore, Mahler
3rd, yeah.
looked at the score of the Ives and also admired it from afar. Why do you think 3rd Symphonies for Americans resonated so much? Why were they hitting their stride at 3?
Well, it's like the same thing. It's just a mistake, I think. Beethoven's 9th, Schubert's 9th, Bruckner's 9th,
I understand.
Mahler's 9th, and so forth. And so that meant, they're more profound because it's the end of their symphony life. That's the 10th Symphony's unfinished by Mahler. The 9th Symphony of Bruckner is quite a symphony, and it tells you a great deal about the end of the 19th century and how the religious spirit still moved a man, a good organist indeed, like Bruckner, who was a complex man. We don't know enough about him. That 9th Symphony is dedicated, guess who? God. To God. I mean, there's a man that is not afraid to commune with God.
Yes.
And Sibelius, many years later, hearing the 5th Symphony of Bruckner, said, how fortunate that this man writes symphony, there's no words, with God in him. We in Finland have no longer a God. They had a mythology, yes.
Yes.
So we are speaking on subjects that, I hope that thousands of you, and I know there will be 1 billion followers soon, not less, I hope, talk to us about these ideas, because we too are hungry.
Agreed. And David, you have me curious before we part what it might be that you were going to read to us.
Oh, maybe we should wait till next time.
Okay.
Because I think we have had a
a pretty solid session.
I think we had a pretty solid session.
Agreed.
And here, I want to hold your hand.
Oh, thank you, David.
You see, there is one of the great intimacies that have been
Yes.
lost. After my class, I go up and give my hand. What? It's as if I grew up with my father. That there was no such thing. He was a merchant,
Mm.
and everyone that came in and out.
Yes.
How are you? And that was today. And of course, after COVID, oh my God, what if we touched someone?
Yes.
We're just getting so stiff. We're getting so.
Yes.
We're letting the machine take over. We're not giving ourselves the discipline and the
Mhm.
tryouts and the trials and the
Mhm.
errors. We're interested in getting rid of pain.
Yes.
Well, Beethoven's ears were not only deaf, but they were whizzing pain
Mm.
while he's composing the Hammerklavier.
Yeah, we probably need our germs. We need our pain. We need these wrestlings.
We don't want pain.
And yet, I remember, and forgive me for going on, but you talked about somehow a lot of the great literature that you read is how, to a degree, people could turn even their illnesses into art in their letter writing. And all we have now usually are these discussions of, trips to the pharmacy. Whereas people used to have these, even as dreadful as it was, we wouldn't have the Poe or the Chopin if we wouldn't really, I wouldn't have tuberculosis return, and yet it's somehow endemic, it's somehow absolutely wired into the experience of those people, how they met that resistant material that made their personality so intense.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
1809 also.
Is he really also
Yep.
1809?
Yep.
Well, Dave, that's remarkable. You'll be meditating that year.
Chopin was born in 1810. Imagine Chopin had actually thought of coming to New York. Imagine Poe in New York and Chopin together. Think of it.
You'll have me thinking of it during the week. So, David, God willing, I look forward to our next conversation.
Well, it's exciting to me to talk to you
I feel the
and
same.
about these extraordinary topics, which are the real thing.
They are.
At least I think so.
Yes.
Tell us what you think. Subscribe to, what's the title of our series?
No art,
No Art,
no life.
No Life. Jack Cole. My name David Duvall. And thank you for listening.